to the world. Subscribe now to the Hot 97 YouTube channel. It's Ebro in the Morning with Laura Stiles and Rosenberg.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen his face before. He has done some amazing work. I would say over the last decade, we've really been seeing your activity covered on social media as well as news services and some of the more high profile, civil rights incidences and the abuse of power of police and government and local authorities. And you representing our people very well. Y'all give it up for Mr. Benjamin Crump. Thank you for joining the program. One time. Bravo.
Hey, thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you all.
I want to start with the most recent event that we got some more, information and closure on, which is the Breonna Taylor case, which your work, along with other activists and social media, many people thought that this case had fell dormant. And to all of our pleasant surprise, we saw many of the officers that were responsible for her murder brought to some sort of justice. Where are things at now?
Now, you're right, King. It's historic when you think about it. This is the first time that police officers have been charged for killing a black woman on the federal level in the history of the United States of America. I mean, the Washington Post did a study from 2015 to 2020. Police killed 400 black women died while in custody of police, and only 8 police officers were charged. 4 of their cases were dismissed, and the other 4 pled to misdemeanor charges, which reminded us all of what Malcolm X said: the most disrespected
and unprotected
person in America is the black woman. So to see Breonna Taylor get some sense of justice with the 4 police officers being charged by Merrick Garland, Department of Justice, especially the first black woman to be over the Civil Rights Division, Kristen Clark, the assistant U.S. attorney who headed up this case. It is something that can remind us that elections matter, because I think the previous administration would have never, ever looked beyond what the Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron did on Breonna Taylor. It would have been open and shut, no justice for another black woman. But today, because all of us working together, us and our legal team fighting in the courts of law and the activists fighting in the courts of public opinion, we came together, and Breonna Taylor will get justice. One of the police officers is scheduled to plead guilty next Tuesday, and that's going to be a very special moment for her mother, who never stopped fighting.
I want to. There's so much for us to cover today, but we spend a lot of time on our program talking about voting and the power of voting. And specifically the power of voting locally, right? In your local municipalities, senators, representatives, whether that's state or federal level, and these things, which then end up, I don't want to say trickling down, but trickling upward into major federal elections like electing president and vice president, passing laws and things like that. But even the appointment of Merrick Garland, who then you just, and I didn't know that is it the Assistant Attorney General?
Yes, civil rights Assistant U.S. Attorney General is a black woman.
I did not know that.
Yeah, she's a sharp sister.
And so I just wanted you to spend some time for people who pay attention to you and maybe don't understand the power of just this moment in history. Of what we're seeing right now from this administration and the Department of Justice.
Yeah, when you think about it, and a lot of times we're critical, but we also have to give credit where credit is due. And oh, by the way, Kristen Clark hails from Brooklyn, New York, so she's one of our homegirls. Is when you think about the cases that I worked on in 2020, these high-profile landmark legal cases, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. You saw this Justice Department get convictions in George Floyd, making sure that the officers who tortured him to death, keeping their knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, were charged and convicted of civil rights violations that deprived George Floyd of his life. And then you saw in Deep South Brunswick, Georgia, that Kristen Clark and her office went after the lynch mob who lynched Ahmaud Arbery for jogging while black, not in 1940, not in 1950, but in 2020, in our day. You know, we have this habit of saying, well, back in the day. No, 2020 is our day, and they lynched that brother. And we saw it on video, and it took 9 months almost for them to even be brought to justice. But then they got that conviction in Georgia. And then you look at Breonna Taylor, which everybody had written off saying it's not going to happen. Black women never get justice. And then they came and brought charges against these officers. And it's going to be a trial for the other 3 because they're pleading not guilty. So we will all be watching like we watched George Floyd police officer's trial. But the thing that's so surreal to me is that in my lifetime as a lawyer, for almost 23 years now, I have never seen a Justice Department doing the kind of stuff they're doing with going after police officers that kill us unjustly. Not since Robert Kennedy, back when, you know, he was fighting for Martin Luther King and John Lewis to be able to have the right to vote in Selma, Alabama, have we seen a Justice Department so committed to civil rights. And so that's why we have to give credit where credit is due. And it kind of justifies in a small way of us going out in Atlanta, Georgia during a pandemic, delivering the Senate to the Democrats, delivering the White House to President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. Think about all those brothers who stood out in lines in Detroit, Michigan, those brothers and sisters who made sure Michigan went Democratic, that helped Biden get to the White House. So we have to keep the pressure on them to say, hey, you got to give us more because we gave, if it wasn't for us,
it's no you. This doesn't happen.
But we see that elections do matter, and it's going to be so interesting because what's going on in Georgia now with the football player who, you know,
sounding crazy, sounds nuts.
And whether he's going to beat Senator Ward or not, because whoever controls the United States Senate, you were talking about, you know, local elections and the courts, which is my purview. You know, Trump appointed more than 200 federal judges for life who are going to put brothers like the brother we're trying to help in Mississippi who have 43 grams of marijuana, and they sentenced him for life in prison, and Mississippi can never get out. And the federal courts are upholding that. And so if we can take the Senate with a bigger majority, then we can appoint more federal judges who are going to sit in judgment of a lot of marginalized people. And then if we can vote on the local elections, your city mayor is normally decided by a couple of thousand votes either way.
Right. That's right.
And that person is going to decide who's going to be the police chief. And that police chief is going to decide whether they're going to have people who are biased and shoot black people in the back and bust open our doors with no not once at 1 o'clock in the morning, or you can elect the mayor who's going to say, no, we're going to make America live up to its promise of all its citizens, whether black, white, brown, or red, that the Constitution applies to all of us. And you think about these judges' elections on the local level. I mean, one of the most tragic things for me to see every day is and don't take Ben Crump word for it, go in the back of any courtroom in America, and worse than how they killed Trayvon or George Floyd or Brianna or Ahmaud is how they kill our young people in every city, in every state, in every courtroom every day in America with these trumped up felony convictions. And I do mean trumped up. I mean, you see young white people who have very similar fact patterns
That's
as
right.
young black and brown people. And you see the white people get a slap on the wrist and they're escorted out the courtroom to live out the fulfillment of their destiny that God has for them and have every opportunity at achieving the American dream. While you see the young black people and the young brown people taken to the courtroom, fingerprinted, handcuffed, and convicted of a trumped up conviction, that felony conviction that they have to wear like a scarlet letter. They have to bear that cross on the back for the rest of their lives. Every time you type in their name in a computer base, first thing that pops up, convicted felon. And I mean, every
now I
chance
can't get a job. Now I can't rent an apartment. Now I can't.
Exactly.
All of that. Can't get into certain schools.
You know, you can't do almost anything once they give you that level, that brand is what I call it. And so what I do, and I try to tell everybody I speak to, if you have somebody who you grew up with, somebody go to church with you, somebody who is your co-worker or your co-worker's children who got that felony conviction, or somebody in your family, because I have convicted felons in my family. Every time I see them, I tell them, hey man, you know, we still believe in you. We know that you still have redeeming qualities. We still know that you can be a constructive citizen for society. We still believe you're one of the best things that your mama and daddy gave to the world. We still believe that you are a pillar of this community. We ain't giving up on you. And we have to keep telling them that over and over again, or we will have an entire generation of our people who have been defined by a racist, unsympathetic, bigoted criminal justice system. 1 out of every 5 black men in states like Florida, Tennessee, and Texas are convicted felons. And they say if this trend continues in the next 25 years, 1 out of every 3 black men in America will be listed as a convicted felon.
Mr. Crump, you've been doing this now for a long time, in the public eye, close to 20 years. Have you, do you feel that things have gotten any better, and that there's any, real rhyme or reason to it in like the fact that people could actually be changing, or is it that we simply have a better administration in office right now? And also, does it ever get easier to have to show up and represent families, whether it be Trayvon's family, Michael Brown's family, Ahmaud Arbery's family, Breonna Taylor's family? Does it ever get easier showing up to do the work that you're doing?
Now, thank you for that question, and I get asked it often. The first thing I'll say about, is it getting better? We have to remember it's a journey to justice. And just like any journey, sometimes you take a step forward, and sometimes you can take a couple steps back. But what we have to always do is remain focused, keeping our eyes on the prize, that this battle is about trying to make a better world for our children. And so, Frederick Douglass said, without struggle, there can be no progress. So we got to always understand it's going to be a struggle. Even when you think about scientifically, you got to have something move forward. There got to be some friction. And so there got to be some struggle to propel us. And the one thing, gentlemen, I don't pray for easier times anymore. What I pray for is that we will have strong children that will be able to overcome whatever may come at them. Whatever the enemies of equality throw at our black and brown children, our marginalized children, we just got to make sure that they are strong enough to overcome it. And it never gets easy, y'all, going to a family of a young life that's been taken off this earth far too soon. I think about, what would have become of Trayvon Martin had his killer not profile, pursued, and shot him in the heart. What would have become of Breonna Taylor? That sister had 3 semesters before she was going to be a nurse. I mean, that young, innocent black woman. And so you look at all these injustices that they have, and it's a lot of it is subtle, y'all. it's sort of I know we're going to talk about menthol ban and so forth, and the issues dealing with, when police have interaction with people of color, minorities in America, it's likely, they say 10 times likely that we will get charged with some crime when we have an interaction with them. And then they say we're, twice as likely to have some excessive force brought upon us. And these are real things. And so we have to deal with these subtleties of the injustices, the microaggressions that, Black and brown people have to live with every day, just walking out their door in America, driving while Black, riding a bicycle while Black, banking while Black. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But we will win this war. I have no doubt.
Before we talk about the menthol ban and how that's going to disproportionately impact people of color and just like you brought up their interactions with authorities, how are you? Like, how do you find balance in your life and find a way to, because listen, like many other attorneys before you, right? There were other gentlemen and women who have been fighting this fight like you are right now, and we got to make sure that y'all are taken care of also, right? And so how are you finding that balance and finding joy while having to step into dealing with all of this trauma and loss of life?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because my personal hero is Thurgood Marshall.
Yeah.
And, I've read about him, I studied him, and I remember reading about him. He said you compartmentalize, as you're dealing with these situations, because when we interact with these families, they're looking at you to be the pillar of strength, the foundation, something to give them some sense of direction, to try to make sense out of something that makes no sense at all. I mean, when you think about losing your child unjustly by the people who are supposed to protect and serve them, I mean, it's one of the most devastating things you could ever imagine. Your children's supposed to represent your future. So to have part of your future just suddenly taken away from you, extinguished, that's devastating. And so I try to be strong and compartmentalize because, like Justice Marshall said, if you can't stay focused on the mission, then you can't prevent even more injustices from happening, more hashtags, of unarmed children of color, young people of color being killed by the police or quasi-police, these vigilantes. Like I represent the 10 people in Buffalo supermarket where this young white supremacist went and killed all those innocent people up in Buffalo, New York. And so you keep compartmentalizing it as best you can. And there's a documentary that Netflix did on me called Civil. And it was fascinating watching Nadia Hallgren, the brilliant young Afro-Puerto Rican director who also did Michelle Obama's Becoming. And as I watched the Netflix documentary, I kept noticing how Nadia really got a lot of my vulnerable moments. Like after we would talk to these families and so forth, I would find myself, constantly rubbing my temples, rubbing my head and all this stuff. And I realized it was a physical manifestation of the mental anguish that I was dealing with, and dealing with so much tragedy and death and loss and, injustice. So I would be not honest if I didn't say it impacts you. We human beings. I lay in my bed at night and I think about, all the ways to try to get justice, because for, these landmark historic victories we had in 2020 with Ahmaud and Brianna and George, you got to remember the police killed 1,300 people as they do on average every year. And we don't know any of those other people. Those people don't get no justice. Right. And you just keep fighting for them too. So, it has an effect. But the thing that keeps me going, man, is I look at my daughter Brooklyn, and I look at the optimism and hope in her eyes. She just started back school. And I just think of what we're fighting for. And our children are worth the fight. And as I said, I know we're going to win this battle because I look at the precedent of Black people in America and everything that we have overcome. I mean, overcoming the Middle Passage, which was one of the most diabolical, genocidal events to ever happen in the course of human history. I mean, being on those ships and losing, 3/4 of the people. So the ones who made it over, we were the strong ones. And you think about how that is the precedent of Black people in America, how we overcame at the founding of this country being defined as 3/5 of a human being. But we overcame that. You think about the Dred Scott decision, and where the United States Supreme Court said there were no rights that a Black person had that a white person were ever going to be bound to respect. And we overcame that. The precedent of how Black people overcame Reconstruction after the Civil War and the vagrancy laws that put us back on the chain gangs, right, and working for the plantations that we allegedly had just been freed from. We overcame that. We overcame Plessy v. Ferguson. Supreme Court says separate but equal when, it was nothing equal about it. We overcame that. We overcame Jim Crow, and we overcame that. We overcame Jim Crow Jr., Esquire, PhD. I mean, in the judges' robes, these people in the Congress halls that ain't wearing the right robes, but still think of Black and brown people as inferior or insignificant or irrelevant. But yet we overcame that. And so what it tells me, y'all, is no matter what they throw at us, we gonna be all right. We gonna overcome it. And that's why I know we gonna win this war.
They've tried everything to kill us already. Kill us spiritually twice. Physically, spiritually, mentally, and we still are finding ways to find joy and finding ways to find the energy and passion to continue to fight, in many different ways. Benjamin Crump, you're joining us today. Yeah, go ahead.
Just you brothers having our platform, I mean, using it to enlighten people to say that we are not irrelevant, we're not insignificant, we're not inferior. We win it every day y'all come on the air, man.
Thank you. And we're honored to be able to have it, right? Because people that came before us paved the way for us to even have the latitude and the voice and the megaphone to have, articulate ourselves with the passion. Because, I often, we was just talking about it this morning, I go crazy sometimes. Sometimes I get up here, I let everybody have it. Everybody can get it. But to be able to do that, someone else sacrificed before me and before them and so on and so forth. So we always try to give honor to, the elders and the people who paved the way and everybody fighting out there for sure. You're joining us today specifically about a menthol ban, which I've heard something about. I'm not quite sure, but there's when you first see the headline, you're like, look, smoking cigarettes is bad, right? Like, we don't want anybody doing that, so get rid of it. But there's some unintended consequences, like we've seen many times over, when the government and policymakers are trying to
Are they unintended?
Are they or aren't they? But yes, I want to get everybody. You're right. I want to get some enlightenment here from you, sir, on what this is all about.
Yeah, as you said, everybody knows smoking cigarettes are bad for you. And I think we universally agree on that. But they have put a ban on menthol, which is the cigarettes primarily smoked by Black people.
And was marketed and was specifically marketed to Black men. My father used to smoke Cool menthol, right? Newport. Menthol. They use black actors and models in the ads. It's been specifically marketed. The flavoring, of these cigarettes in where black people live. Like, I bet you could find if we could find a marketing document from one of these cigarette manufacturers, I'm sure they targeted specific zip codes where it was predominantly black.
Yeah, it was certainly marketed to our people, this menthol cigarette, much in the way, that Johnson & Johnson marketed talcum powder, baby powder, to women of color, saying fresh, and they knew it was, casually connected to ovarian cancer. But when white women stopped using it, they doubled their efforts to market to our community. And it's evil when you really think about it, where they would go market stuff that are bad to us. But with that said, you have to understand that now the government is coming in and saying, well, menthol is so bad that we're going to put a ban on it. But the other cigarettes, we're not going to do anything about that, which in and of itself is inequitable when you think about it. So you're going to ban black people's cigarettes, and you say, well, we're not going to put law enforcement to actively enforce it. Well, when have they ever made laws or policies and gave it to police and say, we don't want you to do anything about it, and think that white police officers aren't going to use it to the detriment of marginalized people of color in our community? We have never seen that in history, but they say, we want you to believe that, oh, no, it's not going to really be enforced. We just want to put a ban on it to have a policy to say that you can't have menthol cigarettes anymore. That's number one. Number two is, man, how can you tell when somebody's smoking a cigarette whether it's menthol or not? So that's
they would have to ban the sale of them.
They would have to ban the sale. They would have to ban cigarettes in and of itself, because if you're smoking a cigarette 10 feet away, the police can't tell if it's menthol or not. So that means they're going to come, they're going to engage you. And that's when the unintended consequences start. Because once they engage you, they say, we think this is an illegal cigarette. Now, what else you got illegal in that car?
And that can be, now, from a law perspective, can that question lead to more search and seizure?
That's our exact concern, because it's an attack on the Fourth Amendment rights of unlawful search and seizure, which we know from stop and frisk and so many other things that they continue to say, well, black people, you all really don't have a right to the Fourth Amendment. We were just talking about Breonna Taylor. The no, not one, they not kicking in white people doors at 1 o'clock in the morning. They were doing it almost 80% in Louisville, Kentucky, only to black people. And so you think about this new policy that they're giving another weapon to law enforcement to, confront black people. I would say engage, but you don't often see that as our lived experience as black people in America. And I'm not saying all police officers are bad people, but I'm saying, and many times they don't treat us with the notion of protecting and serving us like they do our white brothers and sisters. When they come to us, it's almost confrontational. You look at the George Floyd interaction. You look at the Quan McDonald interaction in Chicago, the brother who was killed in Minneapolis, Minnesota before George Floyd, when his daughter was in the back seat, and they shot and killed him because he had a gun, and he told them he had a gun and he was licensed to have a gun.
That was on Facebook. That was on Facebook Live.
Exactly. And you saw the police saw that brother had a gun, and automatically they said, we don't think black people can legally have a right to the Second Amendment, so he shot the brother.
Right, but woven in all of this is the social programming aspect of the history of policing in America and black folks and black men specifically, and that friction, and then the framing of black men as a threat in America, in American media, and everything around that. And so now you have police, and this is documented, this has been studied, police who see young black kids as older than they actually are.
Yes.
Police who engage black people because of their own fear, because they're not accustomed to growing up around us. They're from different neighborhoods or whatever it is. And then you have the mental health of police officers who are working in these stressful environments and impoverished neighborhoods, dealing with stress and oftentimes not mentally evaluated. And these things on engagement over a cigarette, like we saw with Eric Garner, which started because of selling a cigarette, allegedly.
Yeah, a loosey cigarette. And that, unfortunately, it's a medical issue. It's an addiction now. And, you know, you have to say, let's treat it like medical issues. If we say we just going to ban it and people can't get the menthol cigarettes now, then they have to turn to the black market if they're addicted to it. And that, it underscores the problem that even when you think about crack cocaine, they never saw it as a medical issue. They always saw it as a criminal issue. But when you had opioids affecting the white communities, it was a medical issue. You can even, terminate them from their jobs if they were addicted to opioids. They had all those protections because they saw it as a medical issue. With the loosey cigarettes and the menthol ban, we should look at that as a medical issue. We should study it. We shouldn't just say, all right, we're going to arrest people who are selling menthol cigarettes now, because that's what they're doing. Just like they tried to do on Eric Garner, the loosey cigarettes. They saying, hey, we understand that this is an addiction. This is a medical issue, but we don't care. We just passed this policy and we're going to start enforcing this policy, even though we're saying we're not enforcing the policy. What do you think police officers are going to do when they have this new policy that says
they have a new toy now? They have a new tool.
Have a new weapon to use to engage people in our community who they think are inferior or less than. And remember what this is about, y'all. This is about trying to maintain a status quo. I don't think it's an accident that 1 out of every 5 black men are convicted felons. And it's not just the police. The police are the low people on the pole. It's the prosecutors, it's the judges, it's the legislators. Everybody continue to populate this prison industrial complex. And this loosey cigarette, this menthol ban gives them yet another reason to arrest and warehouse people of color. When you think about the fact that they are putting 100,000 more police officers on the streets in America based on what's being proposed by the president and the Congress right now. Now you got 100,000 more police officers who are going to be interacting with people, especially people of color. And it harkens back somewhat to the 94 crime bill, when you just saw the answer to everything dealing with black people is going to be criminal justice.
Well, and how many more prison beds they making money off of right now? How many new prison beds are they trying to fill up on the prison industrial complex, privatized prison systems?
Yeah, so we have to be real careful. And what we're saying to the administration is y'all need to study this. If y'all really care about the minority communities who went out and voted and supported you all in overwhelming numbers, why don't you study it so you won't repeat the sins of the past, that we won't make another mistake on the 94 crime bill. You remember it was people in our community who said, hold on, let's not go so fast, even with the 94 crime bill. The Congressional Black Caucus was like, no. We don't need to be giving them, life or double what was it, 36 times what you get for powder cocaine?
Yeah, it was
for crack
36.
cocaine. Yeah, why don't we let them go get, mental health counselor, get addiction intervention and all this treatment like you did for opioids versus putting us in jail. But everybody said, no, the answer is to lock them up and throw away the key. And that's why we have a whole generation. And I don't know if y'all like me, man, and it gets personal. I think of all the people in my little hometown, in the 80s who went to prison for being addicted to crack. I mean, they went to prison. It was nobody saying, let's try to give them the mental intervention. Let's talk about addiction treatment. They ain't say none of that. Lock those Negroes up and throw away the key, because that's often been the solution.
Well, they were crackheads, and they were framed to look like zombies, walking zombies around the neighborhood. Yep. That's part one. Part two, then they were pulling the. Remember, they used to pull the copper pipes out of buildings, and they were taking things to sell and stealing, and they were framed as all these other things.
Yep, they called our children predators. They called our children predators.
Yes, exactly. And so once they frame it that way, you can get the voters to be fearful, like they do in many cities across America right now with the violence and things, the gun violence. They're not looking at what is causing these young people to pick up guns or join gangs, or how the guns are actually getting into the community. They're not looking at none of that. They just want to frame these young people as something that's scary, so that the voters will then vote in favor of the things we're talking about. And then people want to look the other way so they can go out. Because, in this capitalist society we live in, people just want to get here, go ahead and try to make their money any way they know how. It's a very selfish thing, and we end up kicking the can down the road, which is why we keep having these reoccurring problems, because we never deal with the root of our sickness. We're always just trying to sweep things under the rug, lock it up, and throw away the key. And this is why we end up continuing the same conversation.
Yeah, and it was so deep. I read something that the rapper 50 Cent said. He said that so often we're looked at as collateral damage. And I had to agree with him. He said, the prosecutors and everything, they are trying to build up their career, so they just trying to get another notch in their belt. They want a prosecution no matter whatever cost. And that's why you have so many black and brown people wrongfully convicted sitting in prisons who are completely innocent, because they never really looked at the humanity in that person. To them, they were just a statistic. Another number. And you see that. And then he said something I thought even more profound. He said, and in business, man, it's worse, way worse than when you're talking about the prosecutor's office. Because in business, you got to think these companies who got these prison contracts, they don't care how they get the prison and the cheap labor. They just want it. That's and right. So if it's your children, my children, it don't matter to them, because it's collateral damage. Now, they don't want their children to go in there, but they will, sacrifice our children and won't think twice of it. And that's what we're dealing with. And so you come back and you look at cigarettes and you say, hold on, but white people smoke cigarettes too? Y'all don't care about their health? Oh, this is the one time y'all just care about black people's health? Mm-hmm. And that's why we're going to ban menthol? No, we got to ask critical questions, and we got to study this issue, because this is a slippery slope.
Now, Benjamin Crump, what can people do on a local level to pay attention to this? Where is this happening? Where are these conversations taking place? What should people be looking for to be aware? And what's the action?
Man, this is the prime time here. We got this midterm election coming up, and the congressional members in your district, and remember, your congressional members are local. It's people, they really come into your churches. They may have not been to the church since 2 years ago, but they're coming back to the black church now because they want your vote. And what you have to ask them is, well, where do you stand on this menthol ban? Do you think it should be studied more, or do you think it should just go into effect with no regard for the possible consequences of how it's going to impact our black and brown communities? And so those are the opportunities that we have. We can take action now. Every time they come and they try to engage and say they want our vote, because we less than 80 days now from the November election, this is the time for us to really hold them accountable and have them call the White House. say, I got asked by my constituents, and we're concerned about this. We don't want no more 94 crime bills. The road to hell is often paved with good intentions. And even though you're saying this is well intended, and man, how many of our children gonna have interactions that end up like Eric Gardner? How many of our children gonna get a trumped up felony conviction on selling a Lucy cigarette because it was the way they thought to put food on the table? And they had an addiction issue there because you all banned menthols. It is cause and effect, as you said earlier. That's what we have to make them pay attention to. And so that is the acts. That is the action. Every politician who comes on your show or comes to our community asks these critical questions about, do you think for once we should have the same consideration that you give to the white communities or the lighter communities when it dealt with opioids? Nobody said, let's ban everything and start locking them up. They said, let's study it. Let's give them billions of dollars to treat their addictions. Well, how much money have you given to black people who've been smoking menthol cigarettes all your life to treat their addiction? It's these questions we have to ask these politicians, and they have to go back to the White House and say, this is important to my community, so it's important to me. We want to study before you.
We want to study. We want some info. We want to understand the problem before we just start criminalizing people who are addicted to menthol cigarettes.
Amen.
Mr. Benjamin Crump, thank you for your time today. We hope to have you back on the program too. There's so much great work you're doing, and listen, man, we just send love and support to you and your family, because I know your work takes you away from your family a lot, puts you on the road a lot, puts a lot of stress in your household, and we appreciate you. You're loved, and we just want you to know that, man, and we support you.
Hey, brothers, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity. We fighting to make a better world for our children, and I look forward to coming back, talking with you all about Henrietta Lacks and this black woman named Tamara Lanier who took on Harvard University. And there's so many things we need to educate people on.
Listen, the Henrietta Lacks story, that family, they're going to get, hopefully they're going to see their day.
Hey, man, we suing every pharmaceutical company in the world who used this black woman's sales to make billions, and yet her family didn't get one red cent. In fact, her children can't even afford quality health care, yet her sales are making life better for billions of people at different times.
Benjamin Crump, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Crump.
Hey, thank you, Kings.
Salute.